I filed for divorce after finding out that my wife wanted to give our daughter the last name of her late ex. She said he was a special person and claimed it was her way of honoring his memory. To me, it felt like a complete betrayal. I was alive, present, involved in my child's life, and yet she was planning to name our daughter after another man. That's when I realized I couldn't stay with someone who so easily erased me from my own family. She looked at me like I had betrayed her, even though she was the one who just said our child shouldn't have my last name. I stood in the bedroom doorway, unable to believe I was actually hearing this out loud. 3 weeks ago, we came back from the hospital with our newborn daughter, and I hadn't slept from joy. Now I was sleeping on the couch and staying silent just to avoid exploding. My name is Adam. I'm 41, and I never thought I'd be fighting with my wife about whose last name our child should carry. Melissa and I have been together for almost 6 years. Before our marriage, she had a son from her first partner, Brian, who passed away many years ago. She never gave me much detail, just that he took his own life after a difficult military deployment. Their son kept his father's last name, and Melissa did too. She said it was so the boy wouldn't feel alone. I didn't argue. I assumed it was temporary. I even helped raise him, and he called me dad. But when our daughter was born, I realized for the first time, I wasn't a father in this family. I was a placeholder. We had struggled with fertility because of an old injury, and I had gone through humiliation, tests, hope, and heartbreak. And finally, she was here. Holding our daughter in my arms dissolved every fear I'd carried. But when it came time to name her, Melissa suddenly announced, she'll be Kylie Brenner, like her brother. I didn't get it at first. Brenner was her late partner's name. Why not Reeves? I'm her father, I asked, because Brenner sounds better, and so the kids don't feel like strangers to each other, she replied. That night, I quietly made up the couch in the living room and didn't lie down next to her. It wasn't a protest. I just couldn't breathe in the same room as someone who erased me from the role of father, like I was some donor off the street. All these years, I thought I was building a family, but now I realized for the first time that this family already had its core, and that core had died long before I ever showed up. I was sitting in my car outside her parents' house, keeping the headlights off. The inside smelled like milk because her sister had once again passed on the bottles of pumped milk. I didn't go inside, just left the bag with the warm bottles on the step and drove off. My daughter was sleeping at home with my brother and his wife. They were helping me as much as they could. With 5 kids of their own, they were the first real sense of family I'd felt in a long time. No manipulation, no ghost from the past wedged between us. Everything that had happened over the last few weeks had drained my sleep, my appetite, and probably a bit of my sanity. But I still didn't regret filing for divorce. I submitted the paperwork the same day I registered our daughter's name. Yes, without her. Yes, alone. Yes, legally. And if you knew what I'd gone through just to stay standing, you wouldn't judge me. I wasn't a perfect husband. We'd had a rough patch in our intimacy, a stretch of exhaustion while trying to conceive. There were arguments. There were compromises. I accepted that I couldn't adopt her son. I accepted that she wouldn't take my last name. I even accepted that she kept the last name of her late partner when we got married. But I couldn't accept that my daughter, the only child I'd ever truly wanted, would carry the name of a man who had no blood or memory tied to her, that she would be folded into his legacy instead of ours. I offered compromises. I suggested a hyphenated name with her maiden name in mind. She refused. I suggested we name our daughter after someone in her family. Again, she refused. I proposed that her son take my last name. After all, I'd raised him for years. But she snapped back, "You're not his father." I asked, "Then who's the father of our daughter, if not me?" She looked away. We hadn't spoken since. She shut herself off, emotionally and literally, locked herself in the bedroom, ignoring knocks and pleas. I knew I was causing pain, but what hurt more was how invisible I'd become as a father. When I overheard her telling a friend that she'd rather die than give our child his last name, I called the police. I didn't want her taken away. I wanted someone to tell her, "You've crossed a line." But that line had been crossed a long time ago. She came back 3 days later, but didn't even step inside. Just stood on the porch, looked at the door like it belonged to someone else, and left for her parents' house. Since then, she hasn't tried to talk to me directly. Just bottles of milk delivered through her sister and texts from her friends accusing me of not being able to handle that the child isn't your possession. Then came the attempts to take our daughter. First soft, through her parents. Then harsher. Threats to call the police. I changed the locks. Social services showed up a couple of days later. I didn't hide. Showed all the documents, explained the situation. They saw a calm, clean home, a cared-for baby, watched over at all times. They said, "Given the mother's emotional condition, for now the child should stay with you." I don't know when everything went wrong. We didn't have a bad marriage, or so I thought. Sure, she didn't want to take my last name. I figured it was about her son. Sure, she wouldn't let me adopt him. I assumed it was out of respect for the deceased. But now I see. I was just a convenient stand-in. And when it came to our daughter, it suddenly became clear she too belonged to the past, to a name, a memory, a family that never saw me as part of the circle. And me, I'm the one paying the bills, staying up all night, feeding, rocking, treating colds, planning summers, reading bedtime stories. One day I looked through a drawer where she kept old photos. I found a picture. Her ex, and their son. The boy must have been around 5. They all had the same last name. I remembered how she refused to change hers even before the wedding. And when I asked why, she said, "I just think it sounds better." I chuckled back then and thought, it doesn't matter. Now, it matters when her ex's parents came for my daughter. I told them, "You're not her family, you're the past." They threatened to sue. I said, "Go ahead, wait for the summons." I'm tired of being a replacement, tired of proving I'm enough. I'm this little girl's father. And even if no one else acknowledges it, I won't back down. I woke up to a silence that's hard to describe. Not because it was early. In fact, it was nearly 10. But the house was utterly still. My daughter was breathing softly in her crib, and my brother and his wife, who had moved in to help after the collapse of my family, were out for the day. And in that quiet, I realized for the first time just how much everything had changed. The space that used to be filled with laughter, voices, even arguments, now held only me and a child, and the dull echo of decisions I was never part of. I opened the closet and saw a stack of baby clothes we had picked together. It had felt so important back then. The colors, the fabrics, everything for her. Now it all felt foreign, as if I was just looking after someone else's child, even though she was mine. Mine. But no one called me a father anymore. Not her mother, not her family. And with every passing day, it felt more and more like I was being erased, like a name on a plaque scrubbed off with a coarse sponge. I called a legal advisor to ask what I needed to do to apply for sole custody. The lawyer was calm, straightforward. He said that given the mother's emotional condition, my stable job, and the support I had at home, my chances were strong. I thanked him and hung up. It became hard to breathe. I didn't want this. I wasn't seeking a war. I just wanted to be acknowledged. But now I had no choice. When I told my wife I was filing for custody, she called me herself for the first time in weeks. Her voice was sharp, cracking. She accused me of betrayal, manipulation, of destroying her life. I said nothing. Not because I didn't have anything to say. I just realized that every word between us now was like broken glass underfoot. The only option left was to move forward, carefully, trying not to bleed more than necessary. That same day, I received notice that her parents had filed a countersuit, trying to obtain temporary custody. They claimed I was preventing the mother from reconnecting with the child and creating emotional distress. It felt like a punch to the gut. These were people I had considered family, now portraying me as a threat to my own daughter. I looked at my little girl. She was fast asleep, curled up tight. And I promised myself, even if the whole world turned against me, she would always know who stood by her. Not because of a name, not because of legal papers, but because I loved her. On a cold morning, sipping black coffee and staring at the gray sky, I realized something. Every day now started with defense. Not with plans or hope, but with shielding. From attacks by her family, from judgmental messages sent by her friends, from my own growing doubts. My lawyer told me to gather as much evidence as possible. Photos, receipts, records, references, anything that could prove I wasn't just a father on paper, but someone actually carrying the weight of it all. I never thought I'd be collecting proof of love for my own child. But there I was, typing out a statement at the kitchen table like I was preparing for trial. Not for a crime, but for the right to stay in her life. 2 days later, someone knocked on my door again. This time it was Child Protective Services. They brought a psychologist with them, said they needed to verify that everything was okay. Judging by their faces, I knew she had filed a complaint. The house was clean, my daughter fed and calm, my brother and his wife confirmed they helped. But in the psychologist's eyes, I saw something I didn't expect. Pity. And I wanted to shout, "Don't pity me, don't sympathize, just see that I belong here." They left behind a formal report and said that further decisions will be made by the court. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in my head. She's my child. Like I was just a supporting actor in the birth. Like 3 years of trying, pain, shame, fear, hope, didn't count. Like my fatherhood could just be erased because I didn't have the name she found beautiful. And then the letter came. Official, court hearing scheduled, her name as the plaintiff. She had filed to revoke my parental rights, citing psychological stability for the child. I couldn't breathe. I slowly dropped to the floor and just sat there because I didn't expect this blow. Not from her, not after everything. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling my fingers go numb from the shock. Then I heard my daughter shift in her crib. I walked over, picked her up, pressed her against my chest. She reached out, touched my face, and calmed down. And I knew then, this won't be a story about losing. This will be a story about staying. Not because I had the right to, but because I was needed. Stacks of papers covered the kitchen table. Printouts, bills, message transcripts, documents I'd started gathering the moment I realized this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a Cold War. I was nearly 41, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a husband. I felt like a father being slowly pushed out of his child's life. My older brother and his wife helped however they could. She watched the baby. He dragged me to every appointment. Lawyer, therapist, social worker. They'd been through something like this, and I trusted them more than anyone. Meanwhile, my wife filed a motion to restrict my access to our daughter. She claimed threats and emotional pressure. In texts, she said she feared for her mental state, but in public, she painted me as a controlling tyrant. Her friends called, acquaintances messaged, blaming me for trying to take away what matters most to her. One of those calls pushed me so far I turned off my phone for 2 days. In those 2 days, I barely ate. I just sat by the crib, holding my daughter's hand, repeating to myself, stay calm, stay centered. Then a letter came. The preliminary hearing was set for 4 days later. Her attorney was requesting an emergency order, complete restriction of my contact with the baby until the case was over. I read the letter 5 times. My hands were shaking. My brother looked at me and said, you can't lose, because you're the only one still thinking about the kid. That night, I began building a timeline. I wanted the court to see that everything I did was for my daughter. I rewatched the home security footage from when we still lived together. Found one where she shouted, she's my baby, not yours. And another where I held our daughter while she screamed at her mom on the phone that she wasn't discussing anything with him ever again. I didn't know how this story would end, but I knew I couldn't afford to fall apart. The courtroom was colder than I expected, like the kind of cold that gets into your bones no matter how many layers you're wearing. I sat next to my attorney who told me to stay quiet unless addressed. My wife walked in wearing a beige coat I bought her 2 winters ago, holding a file twice the thickness of mine. She didn't look at me. Behind her, her sister carried a diaper bag, and I realized our daughter wasn't with them. For some reason, that hurt more than anything. The judge skimmed through the paperwork and listened to both sides. Her lawyer claimed I was emotionally unstable, a risk to the child, a manipulator trying to erase the legacy of her deceased partner. Mine countered with evidence, text messages, recordings, and testimonies from family and neighbors. We presented the fact that she attempted to name our daughter after her late ex, something she denied during mediation. My lawyer read aloud from a message where she said, this baby will carry Alex's name no matter what. There was a long silence in the room after that. Her face stayed blank, but her hands trembled. The judge called a recess to consider temporary orders. I sat outside the courtroom, staring at the vending machine, wondering if I'd ever feel peace again. Then my brother handed me a folded sheet of paper. On it, he'd written a list. Reasons you're the right parent. At the top, because you're the only one who's never tried to win, just protect. When we were called back in, the judge looked tired. He granted joint custody with primary placement to me for the time being, citing concerns about the emotional climate of the other household. My wife didn't speak. She just walked out, brushing past me like I didn't exist. I didn't feel victory. I felt the weight of it all. My daughter was with me, yes, but her world had been fractured before it ever got the chance to feel whole. It's been 7 months since that hearing. The house is quieter than it used to be, but not empty. My daughter started smiling more, babbling in the mornings as sunlight hits her crib. I've learned to do things I never imagined I'd be good at. Bottle prep at 3 a.m., soothing colic with white noise playlists, folding impossibly small clothes. My brother and his wife still live with us, helping in ways I never had the words to ask for. Their presence feels like scaffolding while I rebuild. My wife, ex-wife now, has supervised visits twice a week. Some days she shows up early, brings a new toy, sings lullabies like nothing happened. Other days she's late or doesn't come at all. The social worker makes notes, stays quiet, watches. Her family doesn't speak to me. They don't ask about their granddaughter either. I stopped trying to make sense of it. I've accepted that some people only see bloodlines, not bonds. My stepson, well, he still calls me sometimes, quietly, usually late at night when he knows his mom is asleep. We talk about school, about his favorite games. He once asked if I still had the soccer ball we used to play with in the backyard. I said yes, and I do. I'll always keep it. I don't know if he'll choose to stay in my life once he's old enough to decide, but I hope so. And if not, I'll still be grateful I got to be his dad for the years that I did. As for me, I've started seeing a therapist. I don't want anger to be the only language I speak when I think of what happened. I want peace, not just custody. I want my daughter to grow up knowing love that isn't heavy with conditions. Maybe I'll remarry one day, maybe I won't. But I know I'll keep showing up even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. Because being a parent isn't about winning, it's about staying, and I'm not going anywhere.